there was a disaster coming. They said it was a systemic risk to the entire financial system unless there was deleveraging, some kind of regulation for safety and soundness over Fannie and Freddie. Not to get off the point, but I remember those lectures ad nauseum out of the Fed, and as a matter of fact, the Treasury chimed in as well. But on the issue of bifurcating consumer protection and prudential regulation, Sheila Bair, the head of the FDIC, had this to say, and I'm going to ask Mr. Corson to respond to this, if you would. She said, "I've always felt that consumer protection and safe and sound lending are two sides of the same coin, and if you have an abusive product that doesn't serve your customers' long-term interest, it will come back to bite you," unquote. Now, as I mentioned in my opening statement, this idea of separating the two has been around for some time. In fact, we saw that very structure over the GSEs. A weak prudential regulator, in this case OFEO, was competing with HUD. And HUD strong-armed OFEO and Fannie and Freddie into ratcheting up the affordable housing goals. We know how this ended. As Ms. Bair alluded to, the affordable housing goals of Fannie and Freddie enforced by HUD were at odds with the long-term viability of the regulated entities, in this case Fannie and Freddie, and ultimately led to their demise. And I was going to ask you, do you see the potential for future conflicts between a consumer financial products agency and their prudential regulator in this case?
Well, clearly, I mean, obviously there's opportunity for the conflict. I would be in a, not to be simplistic, but for 12 years we've been trying to get the Fed and HUD to work together on one simple upfront disclosure, and we can't get this done. In addition to the fact that what we have said, and in our case, with a federal regulator, we want a combined prudential, safety and soundness, and mission, consumer protection, all under one umbrella for mortgage banking.
Well, let me, certainly the housing goals were created and enforced with an altruistic belief. It was misguided, but it was an altruistic belief that the highest possible stretch for home ownership was to the benefit of consumers. And I think it'd be very difficult to create a separate regulatory entity, charge it with consumer protection oversight, and then not expect it to come up, with a similar politically driven mandate further down the road. It seems to me logical that that would be the course of action here. In large part, these politically driven mandates caused the financial collapse, and allowing for a similar structure will likely encourage similar mandates down the road. So I'd like you to comment on the likelihood that a CFPA will be used for politically driven mandates in the future.
Well, Congressman, obviously that is a concern in any regulatory venue, particularly when you're creating a new one. The issue is, in some respects, there's trepidation that we're trying something, sort of a laboratory experiment, to try something with the consumers, and frankly, safety and soundness being at risk. So I think that there are those concerns.
Yeah, I just don't see how it is not something that we've already tried with pretty clear results. But I'll ask Mr. Zawicki for any observations he has on this front.
Sure. I think you point out more generally the fundamental problem here is that there's all kind of trade-offs that go into this. There's trade-offs between particular terms and the price of loans. Between, as I talked about, prepayment penalties. Consumers pay an extra 100 to 150 basis points to get a fixed rate mortgage. All these sorts of trade-offs to think about, price versus terms, accessibility versus risk, all the different sorts of things you're talking about are invariably, inevitably going to turn into political questions where there's no obvious answer. And it's precisely these sorts of trade-offs between risk and price, for instance, why we've eschewed government central planning in dictating of credit terms in the past, because there's no right answer to these questions, and they run the risk of being politicized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from California, Ms. Waters.